Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Carl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller and Associates CPAs, Jeff Cromendike of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed and Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info at expertnetworkteam.com.
And we encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast. Welcome to today's podcast. I am Nathan Merrill with Goodspeed Merrill, and I am here with Carl Frank of A&I Financial.
Hi, Nate. How are you?
It's a small group today, but Carl and I, in the hopes of having one of our cohorts join us, have decided to get a move on. And
it's going to be a great conversation, you and I.
Yeah, we've been just kind of wandering in our conversation. I think we've stumbled upon something that can be interesting. You know, normally our theme at some level deals with either financial matters, legal matters, you know, those types of
particularly
issues.
For small business Americans, this is our focus. And,
Yeah.
and of course, we're here in Colorado, so we love talking about Colorado.
But that being said, as we've noted in other podcasts, we are business owners ourselves, which is why this interests us.
Right.
But you know what else we are, Carl?
What are we, Nate?
We're humans.
Yes, we are. Oh my gosh.
And the
We've
topic
got-
today, I think, is a human topic and
is.
something that affects us at a human level, affects our employees, and it affects kind of our broader client base or our markets, everything about how we conduct our businesses, which is why it's, I think, important to...
What is the single biggest topic of our time? For the past 2 years, what has everything began, ended, and run over the middle with, other than...
Tom Brady?
And
when is he going to retire?
And it happened.
It happened.
We know. So
But the
now we can
second
rest
most-
easy.
Yeah, the second most common
Is when will Aaron
conversation-
Rodgers join the Denver Broncos? No, that's not it. Oh, we're on the wrong sport.
I'm so reluctant to admit what it really is, but
It is COVID-19.
it is the COVID.
It
yes.
is. It is. It's the single biggest topic of our time for the past 2 years. It's dominated every headline, every discussion with every person.
And
on
even
our-
going back through our podcast, it's like, a lot of our focus has been, how do we deal with it? How do we adjust? How do we keep our businesses operational? How do we keep our employees healthy? All that stuff we talked about
Exactly.
has focused around the existence of COVID.
And now we are ready to end it. I mean, it's been 2 or 3 years. We're used to it. We don't know when exactly we're getting back to something normal, but we're going to talk today about what we think that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, from a social science standpoint, the sentiment across the board, I was hearing some polls talked about today where 70% of Americans are kind of just ready to
we sure
move
are.
on. So
Right.
you have some statistics
We do.
that basically show how concerned we might, you know, each situation is different. I'll put in the disclaimer.
Yeah.
You know, if you have concerns about your vulnerability and your own health situation, you should always consult with your doctor. So these statistics are in the aggregate. They're a macro kind of trend that we need to be aware of. But the macro, when we're talking about our markets and our communities and our businesses, it's the macro we're talking about. So,
it is. Right.
So what have you got in terms of things that you've been monitoring that are helpful for us to understand where we may be at in the cycle?
Yeah, at A&I Financial Services, we track a lot of things. And one of the best resources we have that was put on by one of the world's biggest financial corporations, BlackRock, is called the BlackRock COVID Tracker. We'll have the link in our liner notes for the podcast if you're online. And you can also just Google BlackRock COVID Tracker and you'll see it. And it's the virus heat map. And this is, every row is one of the countries in the world and every column is one of the past weeks, and it's updated every single day with the 7-day moving average of deaths attributed to COVID, and it is low.
Well, and with that, I'm going to throw my second disclaimer that we talked about, because there's one number on here that stands out to me. China has 0.
Can you imagine?
And it's amazing. I don't know how they've done it. They're, but yet they're shutting everything down for the Olympics. So
goodness. Have you seen the photos? It's insane.
It's obviously the data is only as good as the data is.
Right.
So, and then we're also talking about how there's no uniformity across the board on how these countries measure what constitutes a COVID death. That being said, it's the only barometer, as it were, for us to really evaluate what's going on around the globe.
And what's the real risk? I think this boils it down, right? How deadly is this? And this latest Omicron surge, which looks like, we'll talk about in a minute here, it may be ending, right? At least slowing down, is not deadly.
Well, exactly. And the thing I want to point out there before you get into these numbers, because they're just, when they present them on this chart, it's a heat map, like you say. And so red is bad.
Right.
And so it makes some things look really bad until you take them in context of what is actually talking about. But the one thing I want to mention there is, when it comes to at least the US's numbers, I'm skeptical that they're on the high side, right?
And why do you doubt that?
Well, just has to do with a little known
conflicts of interest,
right? Just the incentives to report something as a COVID death exist.
Exactly.
So if I'm skeptical, I'm not completely denial here.
No,
these are the numbers.
Definitely not.
I'm just skeptical that they accurately reflect the real risk that COVID presents, especially when you compare it to other countries and who may be less
able to report.
Or less incentivized in their reporting structure to report something as a COVID death.
Right.
That being said, as high as we are, I'm going to turn it over to you. What does it tell us?
The worst number on here is 7.3. It's America, right? And that means 7.3 million out of 1 million people are deaths with people who had COVID positive results. 7.3. It's a 7-day weekly average. Yeah. So that'd be 7.3 a day over the past 7 days on average per million of population. It's a very, very low number. And that's the worst out of all the countries we see. The rest of them, almost all of them, are in green. There's a handful of yellows, but they're all lower than that. And America has been the highest death rate out of all the countries. And for reasons you just mentioned, we could be a little bit skeptical about whether these other countries are reporting enough or whether America is over-reporting. But the bottom line is this COVID surge is not a deadly surge. This is a lower death rate than many other things that cause harm to us. And we both have dear friends of ours who have much more serious health conditions than this, and they're not making the nightly news. Like, there are a lot bigger things to worry about.
It's snowing outside right now. There will probably be a couple of deaths from car accidents or that sort of thing from these types of naturally, regularly occurring events that we just assume those risks as part of daily life, which brings us to our next topic.
Right.
But I don't know if we want to go there yet. Are you done?
We're almost ready there. Okay. We're almost ready there, because the other side of this, of course, is hospitalization, and hospitalization rates were through the roof. They're now coming down over the past week or two. There's a great chart to see it in America that people that are going into the hospital are not dying from it. And that's important to know, right? That if we put this into perspective, and I think a lot of Americans are getting that, and a lot of people are just tired of it. In fact, I understand Bill Maher is cracking jokes about how even he doesn't want to wear a mask he's tired of these rules. He's ready to move on. I think we're changing here in 2022, and the theme at our firm that we put on a Zoom video. It's on our website if you want to download it, or just skip to the COVID part. Is that this is a pivot year. This is a year where we think a lot of trends. There's 10 big trends, and we think they're all coming to place. And this is a year where the trends change.
That's interesting. So you got two graphs up here, and I do. The other one, or there's another regional, there was something where we were talking and showing how it was on the decline.
Right, exactly. Yeah, positivity tests are up, but they're declining in the U.S., meaning that they're getting much better. But the biggest thing is the new cases per capita. So in the USA, we had this big surge, and it was as high as a third or something of the people coming in were very, very high. And now those declines are coming way down. sharply.
Almost as sharp as they went up, it looks like.
Exactly. So it's like catching the common cold and you move on.
Right.
And certainly a lot of people we know who've had the COVID, who've had a positive test, who had some sort of a symptom, have had very minor symptoms, and they're coming back and they're following the protocols and they're doing what they're supposed to do. And quite frankly, we think the protocols are going to get easier in the future. This is a year where COVID becomes endemic. We hope. We're very optimistic on that. Nobody's ever going to be right on everything. Knock on wood. Exactly right. That this is something that we learn to live with, like the flu.
Well, so that brings us back to the snowstorm analogy. There are risks that a lot of people, especially skiers, I might add.
I know that. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I want to drive in it.
Talking a little earlier about how he shouldn't be here at the podcast. He should be on the road.
So I can have a powder day tomorrow.
Exactly. But there are a number of risks. I'm just pointing to the snowstorm as an example of risks that we have grown tolerant of, that we live as part of our daily existence. In California, it's you could go to the beach. There's any number of things that can kill you at the beach.
Exactly.
There's California right now. There's any number of things that could kill you at the mall, but that is
well. I mean, let's talk about Denver even. I mean, in Denver, Colorado, crime rate's not going down.
Right.
I mean, there's risks here in Colorado that the risks are increasing, but we're becoming used to it, like you said, and I think it's time. I think it's time.
So the question that keeps coming up, and I think this is where we'll kind of round out our podcast today, is the whole idea of going back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked about in a previous podcast, the new normal, which I think is a misnomer. And this is really where I got excited when we decided to talk about this today is every day is like a new normal, or can be a new normal. There's nothing that requires that we go back to how it was. And in fact, the idea of going back to how it was for me, and as I was mentioning before the podcast, is not necessarily a fully idyllic result. There are certain things that COVID has exposed about my life and the things I was doing where I've just kind of jettisoned some of what the unnecessaries, the distractions, the things that were wasting my time. We should not look to return to that as a normal. So when I think of the new normal or going back to normal, as I expressed it to Carl earlier, it's regaining our self-determinism, our autonomy.
I love it. I want to do that too. And absolutely. Isn't this a great opportunity to figure out what really means the most to you?
Where you want to go forward.
Yeah. Right. What was I wasting time on that I don't want to waste my time on anymore? What do I really want to be doing? What means the most to me, and how can I get there? In our family, I don't know about your family, Nate, but there's been an increased focus on self-help and books and audio, this and Zoom, that, and all sorts of things about how do I focus on what means the most to me and make that happen. And I think for small business owners, it's a great opportunity to change the business and the way we do business right now too, and to focus on, well, these are the clients I want to work with. This is the work that I want to do. This is the way that I find fulfillment in myself. And these other things that maybe I tolerated in the past, I'm less tolerant of.
And we can break from our assumptions. We assumed certain things were good because they existed. And by good, I mean that they were the right way to conduct business, the right way to interact in our family and friendships, the right way to engage in our churches, because it's what we'd always been doing, uninterrupted, unimpeded by COVID. And then COVID hits and kind of shakes up that. I was actually talking in my church group a couple weeks back, maybe a week ago, actually, a little over a week ago, and talking about how this can be a reboot. And so like when your computer, as yours was moments ago, started to operate really slow, the first thing your IT group tells you is you reboot.
Hit the reboot.
And it defrags it or does whatever it does. It removes all the conflicting registries.
Right.
Programs aren't talking right to each other. It just stops all that.
Exactly.
And then hopefully when you reboot again, you reboot in a harmonious environment. Your programs and what I expressed, and this is kind of what we're talking about now, is in that process, you realize, oh my gosh, this thing is starting up as part of my startup routine. I don't need that program anymore.
Exactly. I love that.
So you eliminate the stuff that's starting up and bogging down your computer, and everything gets realigned, right?
And we can do that in our own lives with the things that maybe I always started my day with that don't mean anything to me, or the things that I'm doing in my day that I don't need to do, whatever that activity might be. It might even be checking my email more than I need to check it. It might be, accepting phone calls or doing things that are not worth my time. We talked about in a very recent podcast about staying in your box, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the business owners are not good at every box. We've got a lot of boxes stacked up on our table, and we're naturally gifted, and we feel most energized by doing certain things that we're really good at in a certain number of boxes. But we're stuck doing all these other things. So this is a great reboot opportunity to take those other boxes and offload those to other people to get them off of our shoulders. It's also a really interesting time for hiring people. So we've got this other great big challenge. I know we're facing it. I'm sure your firm is facing it because you guys are growing so quickly. It's hard to find people who want to work. And there's a big disincentive or something going on in America. Maybe everybody's doing a reboot at the same time, deciding whether or not they want to do this work.
Right.
And so it's a really interesting time, because one of the biggest trends that, we identified in our research is inflation, and we've had wage inflation, and wage inflation doesn't go away. You can have inflation in gasoline. That's a really good example, because gasoline can go to $5 a gallon here in Colorado. It already is in California. It's almost that in Seattle, where it was a few days ago. And it'll come back to $3, right? But once you give somebody, a minimum wage of close to $20 an hour, it's going to be really hard to get it back to 12.
Right. No, absolutely. And I don't know really where to go with that.
Well, inflation is a big deal. So that's a big trend, right?
That's part of the new normal that we can't control.
It is. And part of that is the reboot with everybody out there, that everybody's saying, oh, I don't really want to do this. I want to do that. And for business owners, it's a great opportunity to get more efficient. It's a great opportunity to say, okay, so maybe I don't want to grow with people. Or maybe I don't want to grow with that type of person. Maybe I want to grow with this other group of people. Maybe I want to find technology. And that's a huge theme.
It is huge. And I'll tell you, but here's an opportunity. So going to the Napoleon Hill concept of in every adversity is the seed of an equal or greater opportunity. Perhaps if we're looking, and this gets to the culture hiring and all that, perhaps we can offer more than monetary compensation or monetary rewards in how we run and operate our businesses. That
right.
Our businesses, sure, they provide compensation, but as I remember reading from some Harvard studies years ago, as you start to climb that pay scale, the rewards are diminishing.
Exactly.
And I think COVID may have ratcheted that break point down a bit. That people are looking for more engaging environments than just the paycheck offers, or that's something to experiment with.
I think that's a huge thing for all business owners to work on, is how can you make your culture so unique that people don't want to be looking at any place else. And if they are looking, you don't want them around anyway. And to attract the people who are a perfect fit for your firm, whether they're clients, customers, or just people who want to work with you. And that's a great opportunity. It's a great reboot. I think it's a theme that the best companies are going to focus on, and they're going to have a great 2022.
And one of the things we can do with these new hires that you're talking about, or the way we grow our businesses, is embrace a reboot concept, help them reinvent themselves. Because this gets back to what you're saying, which is, whether it's our lives or how we do our work, may never go back to the way it was. Like, I have this constant discourse in my office, but is everybody going to go back into their isolated offices, or do we work differently going forward?
Yeah, we were just talking about that as you and I, buy a building together. I mean, that's a big deal. Like, how many office spaces do we need? But we want them in there, and people who are showing up want the other people to show up. And how do you make this fun again?
Right. So it's again, it may not be going back to the way it was as going back to.
You don't want all that stuff anyway.
But letting people reboot themselves, decide how they want to achieve their professional goals, and give them a path to achieve that, give them an opportunity as opposed to a career path.
Exactly. And build the relationships that are meaningful to them in the ways that are most meaningful to them. And that's the loyalty, that's the stickiness, and that's the productivity.
And even, I think this extends what we're talking about it as it applies to the people that we're bringing into the organization. I think it can equally apply to you and me. It's definitely applied to me and how I look at what I want to get out of, my role in our firm as a leader and an owner. It has changed, and it's changed me in the sense of what I want to see, how it impacts my employees, because I very much, as we've talked about, we believe in our employees. We believe that we are as good, we're only going to be as good as our employees are. But where my mindset probably pre-COVID was achieve, it shifted a little bit to more of a satisfaction and enjoyment thing. That the journey, the life journey thing has started to.
It gets more real, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of created a different alignment in terms of priorities and expectations, and I think going back to what we're talking about, what's really going to attract the workforce going forward? Is it going to be the opportunity to work endless hours and achieve, or is it going to be able to do great work for great people and in an environment that really satisfies you, regardless of where that compensation compares to someone else on the pay scale somewhere else, that sort of thing.
I love that. And that's part of what you and I and Jeff and Mike have talked about in the past is it's not just finding success, but significance.
Yes.
Right. You want to make a bigger difference than just the dollars. And the older we get, the bigger that means to us.
And to pass that legacy on to another generation of hopeful successors
to share the joys,
yeah.
to share the joys of overcoming the challenges and feeling that pride and sense of self-worth there's nothing more rewarding than that. It's so much fun to watch other people succeed.
So hopefully that's the new normal. When,
right.
Again, I mean, going back to the semantics that sometimes get wrapped around the new normal is, are we ever going to go back to the way it was? And right. I'll conclude my thoughts by saying, hopefully not. Hopefully we can find a way to improve, but if normal is being autonomous and self-determinative, hopefully we can find better ways to be autonomous and self-determinative and embrace that, kind of liberating ourselves from COVID as the new normal and not some return to something that really doesn't serve us anymore.
Man, second to that. Thoughts. Yeah. Cheers to that. And second to that, I'll say that it's even that is the way we want to go. And that is what I hope we're going towards. And I think that we are. And I'm sure that our country is. And I'm sure that the world is looking to our country to lead them and show them the rewards of self-determination. And we face a huge challenge, I think, in the world right now, in that the number 2 economy in the world is communist, and it directly opposes exactly what we're talking about. And I am just so confident in my heart and my mind and all my research and all my life experiences that the capitalist approach, the approach of you put in a little extra effort and you get the rewards and you help other people do the same thing, you're paid back in countless ways other than dollars, will triumph over the other self-defeating ways of trying to run the world. And I think as we're watching in the Olympics, and I think as we're watching China crack down on all sorts of parts of its culture, that we're going to see our ways the right way.
Amen to that, brother.
Thank you, Nate. This was fun.
And with that, we'll end today's podcast.
Have a beautiful day. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else and join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through A&I Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.